It's interesting to note that King Pṛthu was so much in opposition to hearing his own glories, and at the same time, his followers nonetheless want to glorify him even more. And this is the paradoxical um, aspect of giving and receiving respect, praises, and glories. The more we are um, focused on glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead instead of attracting glories and respect towards ourselves, the Lord in turn would like to glorify the devotee even more. Of course, those glories come through other devotees or other living entities, but behind that is the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Pṛthu Maharaj um, offered his request to all these reciters, the professional reciters, to not glorify him before they actually manifest in his character. And just that appeal was so pleasing to the heart of these professional reciters that they wanted to glorify even more. In other words, they found even this extraordinary quality to glorify. In other words, every act, every action, every word of Pṛthu Maharaj just give others an opportunity to um, to glorify him. So Pṛthu Maharaj's nectarian words gave pleasure to those who heard them, and despite his request that his further glories remain unspoken, the reciters nonetheless neglected that order and started honoring him with praise. And so Prabhupada explains this inspiration in purport number 1, that although the king denied such praise because he was not at that time exhibiting his godly qualities, the reciters did not stop praising him. Rather, they were very pleased with the king, who, although actually an incarnation of God, was so humble and delightful in his dealings with devotees. The king's behavior was very pleasing to the reciters, and consequently, the reciters continued their praise and even foretold the king's future activities as they had been instructed by the sadhus and sages. So the reciters they they feared that their words would be insufficient and would in fact minimize the king's actual glories. Still, they continued, knowing that they themselves would be purified by such an attempt. So Prabhupada writes in the second purport that by glorifying the Lord with exalted verses, one becomes purified. Although we are unable to offer prayers to the Lord in an adequate fashion, our duty is to make the attempt in order to purify ourselves. It is not that we should stop our glorification, because demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva cannot adequately glorify the Lord. Rather, as stated by Prahlad Maharaj, everyone should glorify the Lord according to his own ability. If we are serious and sincere devotees, the Lord will give us the intelligence to offer prayers properly. So then, Srila Prabhupada, in text number 3, he speaks about the idea of extolling the glories of the Supreme Lord, how that can actually be utilized in the realm of preaching. So Prabhupada in the purport number 3 is expressing that however expert one may be, he can never describe the glories of the Lord adequately. Nonetheless, those engaged in glorifying the activities of the Lord should try to do so as far as possible. Such an attempt will please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya has advised all his followers to go everywhere and preach the message of Lord Krishna. Since this message is essentially Bhagavad Gita, the preacher's duty is to study Bhagavad Gita as it is understood by disciplic succession and explained by great sages and learned devotees. One should speak to the general populace in accordance with one's predecessors, Sadhu, Guru, and Shastra. The simple process is the easiest method by which one can glorify the Lord. Devotional service, however, is the real method, for by devotional service one can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead with just a few words. Without devotional service, volumes of books cannot satisfy the Lord. Even though preachers of the Krishna consciousness movement may be unable to describe the glories of the Lord, they can nonetheless go everywhere and request people to chant Hare Krishna. So, in other words, we definitely should feel unqualified to be able to properly glorify Guru and Krishna, glorify the devotees of the Supreme Lord. And yet, we should make every attempt to do so because it is meant for our own purification. And then the reciters continued by saying that this king alone in his own body will be able to maintain all living entities and keep them in a pleasant condition by manifesting himself as different demigods to perform various departmental activities. Now, it is interesting to note that when Veda claimed himself as the king, as the king of kings, he at that time said that okay, the king is known as the reservoir of all demigods, who are simply parts and parcels of the king's body. This is what he said in his own attempt to become the cynosure of all eyes. And here, interestingly, Vena's son, who is Pṛthu Maharaj, is actually manifesting himself as different demigods. And therefore, what he said is actually, in one sense, coming true through Pṛthu Maharaj. So then the reciters, they continued to foretell that Pṛthu Maharaj will be as powerful as the sun in reclaiming land and making it fertile. He will care for the comforts of the citizens, even at the cost of his own inconvenience. And when there may be drought in the future, he will supply rain to protect the citizens from drought. And then, in terms of diplomacy, he will be perfect in observing the diplomatic conduct as an ideal king, as needed by the situation. So in the sixth verse, when the reciters were glorifying Pṛthu Maharaj as being as powerful as the sun, and how he would distribute his mercy equally, just like the sun god distributes his sunshine upon everyone. So in that particular context, Srila Prabhupada gives a purport talking about how the process of tax exaction is meant to sort of meant to be utilized at the time of needs, like emergencies such as famine and food. So Prabhupada gives an understanding of the taxation. So you can look at it later. Then Prabhupada talks about um, how, in order to be an ideal king, the aspect of tolerance is very important. And therefore, in the seventh verse, Pṛthu Maharaj is compared to earth itself in terms of tolerance. So although the earth is always trampled upon by men and animals, it still gives food to them by producing grains, fruits, and vegetables. As an ideal king, Maharaj Pṛthu is compared to the earth planet, for even though some citizens might violate the rules and regulations of the state, he would still be tolerant and maintain them with fruits and grains. So we usually give the analogy of the trees for understanding tolerance, but we can also see a beautiful analogy of earth for the qualities of tolerance. 10th verse is very interesting, where it is pointed out that no one would be able to understand the policies of the king. His activities will be very confidential, and it will not be possible for anyone to know how he will make every activity successful. So, so this particular aspect of Upagupta Vittaha, Prabhupada explains in the purport to verse number 10, that it indicates that no one would know the extent of the riches King Pṛthu would confidentially keep. The idea is that not only the king, but everyone should keep his hard-earned money confidentially and secretly, so that in due course of time, the money can be spent for good, practical purposes. In Kali Yuga, however, the king or government has no well-protected treasury, and the only means of circulation is currency notes made of paper. Thus, in times of distress, the government artificially inflates the currency by simply printing papers, and this artificially raises the price of commodities, and the general condition of the citizens becomes very precarious. Thus, keeping one's money very secretly is an old practice, for we find this practice present even during the reign of Maharaj Pṛthu. Just as the king has the right to keep his treasury confidential and secret, the people should also keep their individual earnings a secret. There is no fault in such dealings. The main point is that everyone should be trained in the system of Varnashram Dharma, so that the money is spent only for good causes and nothing else. So Prabhupada's purports are always filled with many practical instructions, and because Pṛthu Maharaj is representing the Supreme Lord's preeminent quality of ruling or Palana Shakti, and therefore many of these instructions which are about protection will come vividly through these verses as well as the purports. So the point is that Pṛthu Maharaj, in terms of strength, he would be invincible, and he would be ready to give all protection to the citizens using that strength. And at the same time, he would be extremely strong against his enemies. He would be unbearable to his enemies. And at the same time, when the time is needed, he would be also extremely compassionate and tolerant. So these beautiful combinations of qualities will decorate the character of Pṛthu Maharaj. And we'll further hear from these professional reciters glorifying Pṛthu Maharaj. So we'll continue. Thank you.